Good afternoon, everybody. This is David Stearns from Haley Marketing, and welcome to today's Lunch with Haley webinar. Today is our annual Staffing World Recap webinar. This year's conference was in Washington, D.C., and as you can see by the screen, we had a big crew at Staffing World 2018. So Brad, Michelle, Matt, Mark, Brian, Ryan, Paula, and me, we were all in D.C. for what was a really excellent conference. A little more lightly attended than in years past, and we were trying to figure out why, and thought there's probably two reasons. Number one is everybody is too busy recruiting and didn't have time to get to DC. And the second thing is it was sort of nice. There was no impending horrible issues in the industry like ACA, which has dominated the industry probably the last 5 or 6 years. So from a business standpoint, relatively quiet, but from a staffing world standpoint, really good content this year, and we have a ton to share with you today. As is the norm in our Lunch with Haley webinars, if you want to join in as we're going through the webinar, we've got other people on our team besides those who are on today's webinar who are waiting to answer questions or at least get questions to our team, and you can join us on Twitter with the hashtag #LunchWithHaley. All right, so that said, we are going to jump right in and do a recap of the keynote presentations. And Mark, I think you're up first to talk about Jeremy's presentation.
Thanks, David. So first up was Jeremy Gucce, who is the CEO of Trend Hunter and a New York Times bestselling author. And he was full of energy. It was a really good way to start the whole conference. He had a few really interesting points to talk about. And he started with saying that success comes from overlooked opportunities and connections that others miss. By noticing a gap in the market or using modern and upcoming technologies to make life easier for your clients and candidates, you have the opportunity to get past them. He accentuated this point by telling us that 50% of Fortune 500 companies in the year 2000 are no longer on that list. And part of the reason that these companies fall off is because we repeat last year's harvest. As humans, we're very good at continuously going back to the stuff that we know works. We repeat last year's harvest because we know the results that it will provide, and we can try to count on them. The problem is when those results fall off, we don't have a plan to get back up to that level. We get trapped by being complacent, repetitive, and protective of what we've already built. He also recommended using your hunter instincts because your competitors are lazier than you think. A lot of the people in this session, they know that there's going to be technology changes coming, but when asked, they don't have a plan to deal with them. And he said that if you use your hunter instincts rather than your agricultural instincts to get ahead, you can do this by being insatiable and always assuming that you're wrong the first time you try to do something. You want to learn new skills, and you want to try to be your best at doing them. You also want to be curious, and you want to be willing to destroy what you've built in order to make it better instead of trying to band-aid over stuff to get to the solution. And next, we've got Michelle to discuss the second keynote, Inspiring Game Changers.
Thanks, Mark. Molly Fletcher is a very successful sports agent. She was called the female Jerry Maguire, and she talked to us a lot about negotiations. She said, by listening to what your clients really want, you're better able to tailor the end results to what you're both looking for. This was a point echoed in several sessions throughout the week. She said a pause in negotiation shows that you mean what you say, and she even gave an example of pausing for a full minute to show a client that she was serious. Lastly, an overarching theme in staffing world this year was that the best recruiters are the ones who bounce back faster than others from adversity. Molly said the same thing about sports. She said when we lean into challenges, we grow, and on the other side of the pit in our stomach is growth and opportunity. And next up is David.
Thanks, Michelle. Sorry about that. I was on mute for a second. So I'm going to talk to you a little about a really cool keynote from Anders Sorum Nilsson, who was, if I remember correct, Swedish and Australian, which made for sort of an outrageous accent as we were following along as he was talking about Digilog, how to win the digital minds and analog hearts of clients and talent. And on the surface, this didn't sound like that intriguing of a keynote, but as he went into it, it was really fascinating, because what he started to talk about is our world is becoming digital. So businesses are being disrupted with digital. And he talked about some major trends that I'll review in a minute, but the analog world still is vitally important. So digital is about speed of communication, the ability to find and connect with others wherever they are, anywhere on the planet. But on the analog side, it's about the personal touch, the face-to-face, the caring that comes like in our industry, staffing, a relationship industry, and how they marry really nicely together. And examples of some of the trends that he pointed out. Number one is that every business is being digitally hacked. And he gave an example of BMW. And BMW did a study over several years about their workforce, and they found that the workforce was aging. And they had to determine how to best support an aging workforce with automation. Now, what's interesting is they looked for ways to eliminate or reduce repetitive tasks that were taking a toll on their aging workforce, and using the robots and automation to actually better support the humans to improve productivity and reduce defects. And this was a fun story for me, because I had the pleasure of getting to tour the BMW Welt factory in Germany a couple of years ago, and it was a fascinating experience. Not only were the humans and the robots sort of working side by side, the people in the plant actually referred to the humans and robots as co-workers. We found it really creepy to hear that description, but BMW started to think about man and machine. They're not competitors. They have to go hand in hand for the future. And the lesson was to learn to digitize for humanity, eliminating repetitive, high-risk, low-efficiency operations to redeploy people into roles to which they're better suited, but also adding human intelligence in the way machines operate. So as we look at artificial intelligence and how it's coming into staffing and recruiting, it has to have human intelligence as part of it. And then lastly, using digital tools to enhance human experience and eliminate friction. And he gave an example of how cash is being replaced by credit cards and now by digital wallets, so everything's going to be on your phone. Second trend he talked about was the user experience of work must be redesigned. And what he meant by that is that the future of what we're doing has to be more automated, and particularly he talked about more mobilized. Everything we are doing is going to be converted to being able to do it on a smartphone, and that includes business-to-business selling, business-to-business service. And his big question for everybody in the audience is, how mobile is your staffing business today? Could you run your company, service your customers, service your candidates from your phone? And if you can't, you're going to have a competitor who can. And I think right before Staffing World, Uber made the big announcements, hey, we're in the staffing business, and now we're going to do hospitality staffing the same way we supply drivers. That's sort of a shot across the bow to the industry, is how are we going to be redesigning our workflows to compete with companies like Uber? And this is one that sort of made the whole team in Haley Marketing cheer, because he talked about how marketing and sales are moving together, and he called it smarketing. And he said your clients are going to spend more time consuming your marketing before speaking to you than ever before. And you must have engaging content to sell your services while you're sleeping. And we were cheering because we're walking around wearing T-shirts that said smart marketing. And we were good enough to flag down Anders right after his presentation and hand him a T-shirt for a nice photo op. But we totally agree. Sales happens because marketing tees up the sale. Marketing makes it easier to sell. Marketing supports sales afterwards. And this goes hand in hand right now with recruiting. How do we use marketing to build your company brand, make yourself better known, get candidates to want to work for you instead of going to a competitor? That is partially the service you provide, but in as much part, the marketing and how you promote the good things that you're doing to create a really strong brand. And Anders wrapped up his presentation with 5 questions that you should be asking about your business. Number 1, how can I get 2 times the effort, or 2 times the results, excuse me, there's a typo there, with half the effort? In other words, through a combination of technology and human creativity, how can I double my output without needing as much human input by using machines to replace humans or to augment humans? Second, which old analog processes don't offer me any actionable data insights and need upgrading? What things are we doing in our business that we're not getting data on? So are we getting data on all the sales calls we make and how they turn into appointments, how appointments turn into clients? Are we getting data on our recruiting sources, where we're spending all of our money and the efficiency of those sources? Are we getting data from clients back on customer service and temporary worker performance so that we can know, just like an Upwork or an Uber does, how many star ratings each candidate gets? If we don't have digital information to support our analog activities, we need to upgrade. Third question is, what's the compound effect of my competition adopting the right exponential technology, which we don't, over the next 10 years? So looking at new technologies, mobile, artificial intelligence, robotic process automation. That was a concept introduced at this conference that I had not heard of before. If we're not implementing these technologies and our competitors do, what's our future going to look like by the year 2025? The fourth question is, kind of a cute one, what's the analog baby in my business that mustn't be thrown out with the digital bathwater, and which can be further amplified and augmented through technology? In other words, as we migrate from the old world, high touch, all human beings doing things analog, to the more digital, online, mobile service delivery, well, what part of the human element can't we afford to lose? What part of connecting with people, building trust, building relationships has to remain integral to how we do things in an online world? And lastly, another question I love, what would our competition not want us to do next? So those are usually the things that you want to do next. And there was a 6th question he asked along the way, which I'll add to this list, was how can you implement technology in your business to eliminate friction? And we had this conversation with clients as recently as yesterday, when they were looking at the conversion rate of candidates visiting their website to those applying to jobs, and they know their application form on their website's a barrier. Well, what can you do to eliminate friction so that it's easier for people to work with you? Because if you're not eliminating that friction and your competition is, you're going to have some real challenges. All right, next up, who's after me, is Michelle.
Okay, so I love this session. I ended up buying Mel's book, and I've been using the 5-second rule since I've been back from DC. She said we make 31,000 decisions a day, and we don't even know we're making them. It's like when you drive to work and you don't even know how you got there once you arrive. When your brain tells you to take action, you should do it before you can talk yourself out of it, and that usually takes about 5 seconds. So if you say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, it brings your thought from autopilot to intentional. It won't work the other way. You can't say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have to go backwards. This next bullet point is something that I'm dealing with right now. There's no difference between your body, or in your brain and your body, between when you're nervous and when you're excited. So if you are nervous, you should flip it and to say that you're very excited about something. So I am very excited about speaking on this webinar for the first time, and I've been very excited about it all week. Lastly, Mel said, the price of your new life is your old one. She said, do something new, do what you're already doing better and more efficiently, and change the way your thought patterns are formed. It only takes about 5 seconds. Now we're going to discuss some of the sessions that we attended, and Matt will start us off.
Yeah, and actually, Michelle, if I can jump in before we do, I just want to kind of follow up on that, your 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When I sat down in that session, I sort of thought this was crazy. You know, how could stopping and counting down from 5 make an impact in your life? Until she started to share some of the examples of people who broke addictions to alcohol and drugs, who saved relationships with their spouses, who turned around their businesses with the simple thing of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And what was cool about it is that she then went on to talk about how there's actually scientific research saying when you do something consciously to break the pattern, it enables you to refocus on what is the true priority. And when we're on autopilot, we never do that. And I love when you just said, driving to work and how often do you arrive and think, how did I get here? Well, your brain was on such autopilot. The other one I loved is when she asked the question, how many people came to Staffing World to network? And of course, everybody raised their hand. And she said, and how many of you are sitting at a table only with people you know? And everyone kind of sheepishly laughed. But the reality is we were all on autopilot. We walk into a room, and the first thing we do is we look for who do we know so we can go to them and be comfortable. That's autopilot. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, remind yourself I'm here to network, was a simple way to break it. So I love that presentation. And now Matt will jump back into some of the breakout sessions.
Thanks, David. One of the first breakout sessions I went to was run by Eric Gregg of Innovero. And Innovero, has known a lot in the staffing industry, runs the Best of Staffing program. And in their research and surveys, they're able to collect a lot of information. And Eric shared 9 different trends and takeaways. And here I just want to highlight a couple of them, with the first one being 55% of job candidates think all staffing agencies are the same. That obviously that's more than the majority, and the challenge is for staffing agencies to differentiate themselves and not be part of that 98% of companies that say it's their service, because that's not standing out. So what can you do as a staffing agency to really highlight, different parts of your culture, your team, anything that would make you stand out from a job candidate, so when they're looking for a job or their next assignment, they think of you. The next one talks about their Net Promoter Score, which is what Best of Staffing talks about. And a detractor is a person who would rate your company on a scale of 0 to 10 in that, 0 to 5, 0 to 6 range. And what's really powerful here is they're 4 times less likely to refer your company to someone else, and then 3 times as less likely to take a future assignment with your company. So what can you do to really focus on getting your employees happy so they're able to refer to your company and drive more business in this really tight candidate market? The third point, talks about different generational behaviors and how the millennial generation, which is always a popular topic at staffing conferences, is becoming the biggest percentage of the workforce. And one of the takeaways from their surveys was how half of the millennial job population would rather find a placement for a job online than actually physically pick up the phone and talk to a person. That's a combination of having grown up in a more digital world and expecting a really instant connection, and they feel a better connection online than in a phone call, which is how the staffing industry is really built. So it's shifting that perception to meeting the needs and desires of the millennial generation. And then the last one really focuses back on that referral point I was talking about, and it really hit me when Eric was talking about this, was we refer individuals more than companies and brands. And I thought about it, and we refer a recruiter, we refer maybe a salesman at a car dealership, we refer an individual more than just referring a company, because that individual had the really impactful, made that impact on us, maybe more so than just the brand. Now I'm going to shift it over to Brad Smith, who was at the seminar as well with me and has some other takeaways.
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt. I love Eric's presentation because it's rich with data and survey analysis. And one thing that really stood out to me during the presentation was how much of an internal turnover issue staffing companies have. Now, we talk about recruiting and how our temps may be leaving and may not be redeployed, but a big challenge for us is internal staff. And if 33%, a third of our internal staff, is leaving every year, it's really hard to provide consistent service. It's really hard to build those strong relationships. It's really hard to differentiate our firm and stand out from the competition when we're continually trying to train and bring new people up to board. And what Eric found was that, unlike most industries where people kind of quit their boss, where they may not agree with leadership, what they found is that in staffing, the team is the most important factor. So when you look around at your internal organization, think about what you do internally to really drive motivation with the team. So we're trying to differentiate our services. Oftentimes we look outside our building, and we really need to start internally. Are we kind of incentivizing our recruiters and our managers the right way to work together as a team? Or are we incentivizing them to kind of keep things separate? Sometimes recruiters will hold candidates back and not share them with anybody else. And that's not moving the company ahead, and it's a problem with how they're incentivized. So we really need to sit back and we need to look at that. And then Eric shared a great example. So he mentioned Steve Nash, 8-time NBA All-Star. He was a 2-time NBA MVP. And they looked at how many times he gave his teammates high fives during an average game. And it wasn't 50 times, it wasn't 100 times, it was 235 times per game. He was going over to individual teammates and high fiving them. So one of the best basketball players in the world is going out of his way to uplift his teammates, to encourage them, to motivate them, to recognize their great contributions. And we need to look for ways that we can do that internally with our teams if we want to be innovative, if we want to be a best-in-class staffing agency. And now I'm going to pass it back to Matt, who's going to talk to us a little bit about driving Facebook applications and a really great way to use Facebook's lead generation tool.
Thanks, Brad. This was my presentation at Tech Park, which I was really honored and excited to present at, where they're 10-minute presentations right in the expo hall to anybody with a radio transmitter, set to your channel. They can listen to you from anywhere in the expo hall. And I talked about a couple of different ways to really collect candidate applications on Facebook, with recruitment being such a challenge. And the first one is a free option that all businesses can use. It's called Facebook Jobs. If it's not activated on your page, I would suggest going in and activating it. And what you can do is essentially use Facebook almost as a job board, essentially, to post your open positions, where you can post the title, an image, salary data if you would like, location, ask a couple of questions, and then applications would come through in a couple of different ways. One can be through a Facebook message right to the inbox of your company page, or it could go through as an email to one person you designate for that job. So when you set up the Facebook Jobs, you input all the information similar to how it might be on a posting on your own website, and then you can designate one person to receive that information and then follow up with them as a lead from your inbox. And then the last couple of points, the other point I talked about was on Facebook lead generation ads. It's more of a paid advertising technique where you could show an advertisement, talking about, are you looking for a new job? Do you hate your job? Are you looking for more pay? And it would show up in the Facebook timeline when somebody's on their phone or on a desktop. And then if they click on the ad, it will pop up a really short form. It's called a lead generation ad just because that's what Facebook calls it. And in staffing, we tend to think of that more on the client side and the new business side. But to use this technique, it pops up a really short form on their phone to really, we suggest, I talked about in the presentation, just get their name, email, and phone number, because, there's a stat out there, over 90% of ads in Facebook are clicked on mobile devices. And how many people have a resume available on their mobile device? That percentage is going to be very small. And with the job candidates on Facebook who are looking for jobs, that's more in an industrial, a clerical position, they just want to give you their information and then hear from your team on the opportunities that you have and how you can help them find that next job. The next session I attended was by Matthew Nagler from a company up in the Northeast, Bank W Staffing, where he was talking about social networking and recruiting and how it's been changing the game of recruiting in 2018. And the story he talked about was he had a friend on Facebook who saw that another friend had moved to the area. And what that person did was they were able to connect with that friend, saw they were attending a job fair, went to meet that newly relocated friend to the area and talked to them and was able to get them into a placement. And without social media, without the connections on Facebook, that would have never happened, just by being observant, having that connections, and then taking it to the next level to think, well, somebody's moving to a new city, they probably need a job. I can help. And that's how they are able to get a placement out of, just by being really cognizant and aware on Facebook. The other one he talked about was building some content to use in multiple ways. And an example I want to share here was, like, let's say you have a 30-second video, a 60-second video highlighting your company culture. It could be interviewing an employee you placed. That's something that's really great to share on your career site, to share on social media. Maybe you can pull out an awesome testimonial from there that talks about how, the staffing agency was a great help. A recruiter really helped me, and throw that on a graphic. Share that on on Facebook or on LinkedIn. And then maybe you can turn it into a blog post by interviewing that candidate and highlighting their awesome experiences to share why, your staffing company made an impact in their life. And the last one was really interesting, and Matthew was really kind of, open to share this, was he likes to walk around the office in socks. And for his birthday, his team got him socks with his picture on it, his face. So what he didn't know is that his team was taking a video to get that really authentic, engaging reaction of when he opened a package of socks with his face on it. And the take home here is that went on the internet, onto Facebook, and then a job applicant saw that video, saw the culture of the company, made them apply for the job, and it was brought up in the interview. The job applicant saw the culture and video and said, that's a place I want to work. And that's a way you can really highlight your company and your culture through your recruitment marketing to get candidates in this tough market. Next up, I'm going to pass it over to Mark.
Thanks, Matt. The first session that I went to was from Adam Bleibtreu, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Creative Circle and ASGN. It was about enhancing candidate and client acquisition through digital marketing. He made the point that the average person sees more than 4,000 ads per day. And I actually think this number is a little bit outdated. I think it's more than that now, upwards of 5,000 ads per day with the ubiquity of advertising on social media. But we're bombarded by ads on a daily basis between online advertising, billboards you see driving, television, streaming, etc. And your marketing has to really stand out to be relevant. And you stand out by making your audience the center of your content. In order to get them to latch onto your message, it really has to be about what's relevant and what's important to them, not to you. They have to be the ones that are really affected by your messaging. We spend a lot of money and time on job posting, and most companies spend more on this than any other type of marketing, but they spend the least amount of time doing this. They don't put the time that they need to into what their investment requires. By writing better job posts, we can write better job posts by using engaging job titles, testing different titles and descriptions, selling the position to the potential candidate up front, painting a picture of their ideal candidate, and more. In order to really get the potential candidates into this job. And actually, at Haley Marketing, we did a really good article about this in our Idea Club last year. And next up is Michelle to talk about the $1 Million Recruiter mindset.
Thank you, Mark. This session talked about how just different the top 1% of recruiters are, how they think, how they act. And really what makes up that difference is mindset. They apply techniques that work better than other recruiters, and it sets them apart by how much they earn, by how much they're trusted in the industry. And I know Mike interviewed 8 different people, and the one thing that was common on all these top recruiters was their mindset. They're also very niche. You have to narrow your focus down until there's only one thing that you can do better than everyone else, and then you do that thing. They also ask candidates why, and curiosity builds connections. We actually talked about this in a consulting meeting today at Haley Marketing. The more you ask why and the more curious you are, the more information you get and the better that you can be at meeting your clients or your candidates' needs. And finally, you have to find out what the candidate really wants from a recruiting partner. You can't just go up to someone and say, you should work with me because I've been in business for 15 years. You should say, I'm reaching out to you because you said this was important, and I think I have found a job that will fit everything you said was important. And now I'm going to turn it over to Brad to discuss his presentation on driving applications.
Thanks so much, Michelle. As Matt mentioned earlier, he had the chance to talk at Tech Park this year, and they were kind enough to invite 2 of us from Haley Marketing Group to present at Tech Park. And I think the reason really is that recruiting is such a huge challenge, and both Matt and I took different approaches to how we can use technology to drive more applications. And what we talked about is thinking through the recruitment funnel. Right now, one of the biggest line items on our budget is recruitment advertising expenses. We have to spend a ton of money on job boards, job postings, and literally we spend thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars per company on recruitment ad costs. And we can be a little bit more efficient. Typically what happens, job order comes in, recruiter posts that up on the job board, we get applications, we screen applicants, we send some candidates on to our clients, and they might hire one. Well, what's happening with all of those other candidates that you've screened and are qualified candidates? They hopefully go into your ATS, but then they just sit there and they don't really do anything. That's just great inventory that could be out on assignment that's just sitting in your ATS doing nothing. It's not, they're not getting placed, they're not, you're not earning placement fees on them, and it's a lot of lost revenue. So what we talked about is getting that data out of your ATS. If it's not going to do anything there, let's put it to work. So you can easily run an export on your ATS, pull out candidates that maybe aren't on assignment, and then we can target those people through low-cost Facebook ads and really turn passive job seekers into candidates that are looking for an assignment. We do that with compelling copy and compelling creative. So we need to give them a reason to consider a new job opportunity. Many of these people are passive candidates. They're already maybe out on assignment, working with another staffing company, working in another role. Let's talk through things like dealing with a bad boss. Let's talk to them about what their earning potential could and should be. Let's talk to them about new technology or exciting projects that they could be working on. And if we can create that emotional response, they're more likely to consider our opportunities, and it's much less costly than going out to a job board and placing another job opening. So let's use that database. You spent thousands upon thousands of dollars building that ATS list. Let's export it and let's put it to work. Now I'm going to pass it over to Matt, who went to an interesting session from ASA on market intelligence.
Thanks, Brad. The session from the ASA was led by Cynthia Davidson and did a great job of presenting a lot of the data that the American Staffing Association is able to collect by surveying the members of the association. And one of my biggest suggestions would be to log into the dashboard, consume that data, see how it applies to your company, maybe even reach out to ASA and find out how you can contribute to that data, just because the bigger base they have, the more reliable that data is going to be. For example, when they talk about 2/3 of staffing agencies are providing a 401k with company match or a 3% budgeted wage increase next year, that's just a small sampling of the data they provide. One of the numbers that we see a lot if you follow ASA is the staffing index, and it's a benchmark that was set in June 2007 and really tracks the weekly changes in temporary and contract employment. It comes out about 9 days after the close of a work week, and right now it's around 103, which it's really close to being the highest it's been in 4 or 5 years, which probably isn't a surprise for you as you know how well the staffing industry is doing this year. And then lastly, Cynthia's, one of the take homes was to make sure the data you're reading is credible. Is it sourced? Could it have a bias slant? Does it have an agenda? Does it want you to come with did it enter its survey with a takeaway before even looking at the data? And with, obviously the random fake news that seems to be really big out there with social media and whatnot, really think about how that data is being sourced, look at the credibility to make sure it's solid before making, business decisions and applying it to your company. Another tech part presentation that I went to was with Brad Herman from, well, they were Call 'em All, and they're close to calling themselves Text 'em All because of the power of text messages recruiting. And what I liked about Brad's 10-minute talk was it wasn't a sales pitch. There was a lot of presenters there that were really just, they were digging into their products and their services, which was great, but Brad's was really educational. And it talked about, for example, how if you're texting with a local number, you can only text so often. But if you're texting with an 800 number, that you're allowed to text more often. And if you're working with a company and a text messaging platform, are they able to pull out landlines out of your data? Because landlines do compose about 10 to 15% of your numbers, which could be wasted spend if you send a text message to a home phone. If you find an industry partner in texting, how is it comparing to the data that's coming back from the wireless carriers, from the Verizons, the Sprints? How is it looking at that data? Is it, in that 2% kind of range where if it's about 2% off, that's okay? Is the data right? Is it coming across as too spammy? That's where you really want to find the right person to partner with. Also, you want a way to find, when we get text messaging that we may not have, may have signed up for it, a number of years ago and then get a message on our phones. If somebody replies stop, that's easy to take their number out of your database to get them to opt out. What happens if somebody says, OMG, no more? Does that count as a stop? Does that not count as a stop? But if you interpret it the wrong way, you could get $500 fine per message. And that's not to scare people away from text messaging. That just wants to make sure you have the right logistical parts in place to make sure you're handling everything correctly. And lastly, with texting, not really with being just, obviously literally words right now, is there a future with more smartphones and capabilities to have, graphics in there? Maybe if you click on a certain part of the graphic or show your logo, what could happen there? It wasn't anything promised or that we could see in the near future, but just a different tactic to keep in mind. Now I'm going to pass it back over to Michelle.
Thank you, Matt. So I attended the New Language of Staffing session, and it was put on by Catherine Farr. She was part of a third-party research firm that looked at a lot of messaging in the staffing industry, and the results were really eye-opening. Basically, it doesn't matter what words you use, it matters what people hear. And she spoke a lot about truths, your truth and the candidate's truth. So what is a candidate's truth? Their emotion shapes their perception, and if candidates have a negative emotional reaction to your staffing company, they won't want to work with you to find a job. We also spend a lot of time trying to prove that staffing agency jobs are valuable, but candidates already know that they are. So we can really stop tailoring our message to that angle because it's unnecessary at this point. What candidates really want to hear is that you're going to help them find a new job based on their qualifications and that you'll listen to them. Candidates want someone to be on their team. They believe that they could get any job they want if someone will just listen to them and get to know them rather than just looking at keywords in an ATS. The research behind what terms resonated well with candidates was fascinating. Terms like flexible hours or use this as a stepping stone to get a permanent job had very negative connotations. Flexible hours sounded like they probably won't get the hours that they need with this one job and they might have to find another one. And also using it as a stepping stone to get another job just shows that it's going to be temporary and they won't work there for very long. For more information on this, I highly suggest going to ASA's website. There's a lot of data there, and it's something that you can start doing right now to help attract different candidates. And now I'm going to turn it back to Matt.
Thanks, Michelle. We're going to talk about how this was a really good session on technology tools and reshaping your staffing business. And it was about a 90-minute session we could do an entire webinar on. And they touched on different areas, talking about sales, recruiting, and talent shortage. And Tom Erb led the sales part about, one of his takeaways was how could we implement marketing automation, artificial intelligence? If you were at the conference or if you just saw the vendor list and exhibitors there seemed to be just overwhelming amount of different automation or AI tools to find ways to help run staffing agencies better and with recruitment better. What can you do to get all these systems to talk to each other? What can you do to get someone to enter a marketing automation platform and then you can send them content every couple of days? On the recruiting side, they talked about how matching candidates to job orders without human intervention, which was kind of shocking to be quite honest, but they walk through the process of, let's say a job order comes in, the software will parse the job description. It could look at your candidate pool that you already have. How did you look at that pool, rank the different parts of the description through artificial intelligence, compare all of that to your candidate pool, and then bring you a short list of candidates. So the job order would come in, look at your pool of candidates in your database already, and then bring you a short list of candidates that your recruiters could follow up with. In the talent shortage area, talked a little bit about the robotics process automation that David mentioned earlier. What can they do to eliminate or shorten repetitive tasks? Is it looking at employee onboarding, invoice processing, leave of absence management? One of the funnier parts of this speech was talking about how robots don't sleep and they can, work 24/7 essentially, where productivity might increase. You could get faster turnaround, air-free data processing, and really let your recruiters and your team focusing on those consulting and really stronger recruitment tasks. Some of the other technologies that were really interesting was Monster Studios is introducing this app where you can create a video to partner, to accompany your job description. So create a 30, 45-second video, attach it to your job description to create a bigger connection with your audience and really maybe show some of that human side of the element of the job that you're offering. The Career Builder mobile app really focused on augmented reality and was really neat in that if you had the app open on your phone, and this probably works more in a metropolitan area, you could be walking down the street and the augmented reality would show all the open jobs at the businesses you were walking past down the street. That's a pretty neat way to find open positions in your local community. And finally, kind of the whole takeaway was, staffing agencies or any business outside of staffing could keep doing business the same way. And you might be doing okay, month to month, year to year, maybe your business is just slowly chipping away. But if you don't, that slow chipping away is going to really add up in the end, and your competitors are going to have better options, and your younger candidates aren't going to like your process, and you're going to be in trouble. Next, I'm going to pass it back over to Mark.
I went to watch Leo Sheridan, the CEO of Advanced Group, talk about plan, position, and propel your business to new heights. It was a really interesting talk from the management side of things and a really top-down view of how Advanced Group really has impressive growth year over year. He talked about creating the foundation for your company. What is your why? If you had all of the money in the world, what would be your reason for going to work every day? Your company's mission and your personal mission should be more than a paycheck. He also discussed the organizational health of your company. It's created by building a cohesive leadership team and establishing clarity among that team. Then you have to communicate that clarity to the rest of the people in the organization by putting a structure in place to reinforce clarity. At Advanced Group, they did this by putting their mission and company goals on placemats. And they put these placemats all over the office. They're on posters, they're on every table, and they show their progress towards the goals and what else they're trying to achieve in the next quarter, the next year, and so on. They're not hiding that information from the people in their organization, which makes it very clear to everyone. And then finally, it sounds like a no-brainer, but better managed firms are more successful. They're more profitable, they grow faster, they're less likely to die, and are more likely to attract talented employees and create better worker well-being. Those best places to work boards, for example, can be an important tool in showing that kind of mentality to people outside of your organization. Brad was also in the session, and he's got some additional takeaways.
Thanks, Mark. One thing that really stood out that Leo shared with us, especially now as we're planning for 2019 and really putting our strategy together, are 5 questions that CEOs should ask themselves. And he positioned this as questions CEOs should ask themselves, but I think that everyone at almost every level of the organization should be asking themselves these questions. I think it's great for career planning, and it's great for moving your department or your organization ahead as a whole. And the first question was, what doesn't fit? So think about that for a second and look at your business and see what doesn't fit in. All too often, I think we have staffing sales reps that are bringing in orders that really just aren't aligned with the core focus of the business. Why are we taking those orders? Why are we taking orders when the pay rate is so low that we know that we can't effectively fill that position or pull talent in? We need to take a look in our database and see what doesn't fit, see what processes don't fit in our organization, and be more diligent about making sure that we don't take that work on. And the second question was, what would an outsider do? So periodically, we need to be an outsider in our own organization and kind of try to get rid of all of our bias from being internal and being too close to things, and try to think what somebody coming in new to the situation, maybe new to staffing, maybe new to recruiting, would look at our business and question why. Okay, if you find things that an outsider would do a little bit differently, explore the reasons why. Try to look for ways to incorporate some of that ideology into your processes. The next question was, is my organization consistent with my strategy? And I absolutely loved this one. And Mark mentioned earlier that Leo shared a placemat that he has plastered all over the organization. It walks through the overall strategy. It's very transparent with financial goals, and it makes sure that everyone is aligned. But more importantly, what it does is with every meeting that they have at every level of the organization, these placemats are right in front of people. It reminds people what the organization is working towards. It makes sure that what we're suggesting day to day is truly aligned with the big picture, and it's moving the organization down the right path. And I think it's crucial to have that reminder at every step of the way. The fourth question was, do I understand why we do it this way? I think all too often we get caught up in processes and oftentimes don't look at them close enough to realize or question why we do it that way. There's a lot of new technology that can help streamline things. Let's look for ways to incorporate that. Let's look for ways to continually evolve what we do and how we do it to be a more efficient organization so that we can all make more money, make more placements, put more people to work. And the last question was, what might be the long-term consequences? Okay, so if we continue to go down this path, is it going to be a positive consequence or is it going to be negative? And he tied this to internal staff. So sometimes we hold on to people for too long. We try to look at underperformers and look for ways that we can turn them around and help drive performance and help motivate them when we should have cut ties a long time ago. So it's a tough question to ask, but we need to look at what the long-term consequences of our immediate decisions will have. And it's, again, tough question, but I loved these 5, and there's something that everyone in the organization should look at. Now I'm going to pass it over to Brian, and he's going to share some tips that are probably near and dear to almost everyone on this call, and he's going to share some staffing sales tips.
Yeah, so thank you, Brad. And if I called you up today, or I called anyone here on the webinar up today, and I said, you know, I have this really great opportunity, and it's to be a sales manager or a senior engineer of a company, and I think you'd be really great for it. You look at me like I'm crazy and say, well, Brian, you never even heard what I do. I'm a forklift driver, or I do something different. I'm an admin clerk, or I'm a CEO of a company. Why would you offer me this job? And that's really what John Ruffini went into, is that before you can make anything, offer a suggestion, offer a solution, you have to properly understand the person that you're talking to. So if you're selling, you're doing it wrong. And that's why that was the example of what I did when I first got on this slide. If you have the proper information, what the candidate expects, and what the client is willing to offer, if you know all that information, then making a deal should be more akin to matchmaking or presenting suggestions instead of selling. So to do this, you really have to understand the keys to how you can go ahead and close a deal. One, you have to understand the push. What is someone going to, why do they reach out to you in the first place? What makes them want a new job? What's their motivating factors that they're using to decide on whether or not this new opportunity is going to be positive? Is it responsibilities? Is it advancement? Is it money? If you don't understand any of that, then you're not going to know that when you offer the new position, whether or not they're even going to be interested in it or not, even if it's a fantastic opportunity in of itself. You also have to understand where they're currently at, and that's their total compensation package. This is everything from benefits to pay to their office culture and what the way they want to work. Lastly, you need to understand the candidate's walkaway point. And I know this can sometimes be a touchy subject for a lot of recruiters out there, because it's hard to ask the question of what's the absolute lowest you're willing to take? Because a lot of candidates are going to feel like they're going to get lowballed just to get a position. But understanding what that lowest point is will help you get a candidate into a position that is best fitted for them. So making sure you understand all those are very important. The next thing is that before you offer a candidate a position, you have to make sure that they're actually committed to doing it. So you understand why they're leaving their last job. You understand what compensation package it's going to take to get them to leave. And say you have that perfect job opportunity, matches every single one of those key takeaways that they really need to be pushed to that new job. What you need to understand is when a candidate wants to leave their old job, you need to find out that when you offer to them, if we offer you this job today, will you take the position? And that's a really important question to ask, because there's no point in offering a job if the candidate's not ready on that day to accept it. So why waste the job opportunity on that person? Instead, go and offer to somebody who's ready to accept it on that day. And lastly, it's always important to remember that there are going to be objections to anything that you put forward, whether on the sales side or on the recruiting side. And it's always important to remember that you need to acknowledge it, understand the information that they're using to make this objection, clarify the position, and offer a solution, and then hopefully close the deal. So next one up here is going to be David and Ryan.
Thanks, Brian. All right, so Ryan and I are going to review one of our favorite speakers, our friend Scott Wintrip from Wintrip Consulting, and he was presenting on the concept of just-in-time talent. So in part one of his workshop, he talked about leveraging the impatience economy. In other words, if you remember from Willy Wonka, the Veruca Salt, I want it now. That's what everyone has become, is they expect instant gratification. You know, when I go to Amazon, getting it tomorrow now isn't fast enough, so Amazon is doing delivery within 2 hours in some markets because of this impatience economy. Well, it applies to recruiting. When I need to hire and I need a temp, I want it now. And so what Scott talked about is, if you're going to be faster and survive in the impatience economy, you have to kill the old way of staffing. And old school meant take a job order, start recruiting, keep the job order open until I can find a candidate, keep the job order open, keep the job order open as I'm trying to hunt for talent. That doesn't work. The new way, as Scott was talking about, is to proactively line up talent that will be needed to fill the jobs the moment the jobs are open. And how do you do that? Step one is define your core. Everybody on today's call, there's something that you're really good at. Those are your core positions. Where are you the best at recruiting? What jobs are most in demand by your clients? Which jobs make up the core of what you're already filling today? And then when you're defining your core, Scott said, start with one job that we can be the best in the world at recruiting. And then over time, you may grow to 3 or 5, but it's a small number of jobs that you're really good at filling. And for the most competitive staffing companies, those small number of core jobs will make up 60 to 75% of their total placements. Then they'll have other jobs that are just essential jobs or just sporadic jobs that make up the other 25 to 40%. So they do other things, but they focus on the core, and then they build into the core a layer of unwavering quality so we never get it wrong. We facilitate more accurate candidate selection. We leverage a guarantee to eliminate the need for clients to interview. We may even offer clients the concept of a 2-hour working interview for free to prove the candidate has quality, because that 2 hours for free means no rounds and rounds and rounds of interviews and faster placements. You'll get the money back many times over. That working interview concept allows your clients to see, hear, and experience the candidate in action. And if you can't do a working interview, then a video interview or something that's more experiential than just the traditional ask history questions, ask behavioral questions, and see how the candidate answers. If clients insist on doing interviews, Scott recommends that you get the clients to also do experiential style interviews so they can really see the candidates in action to make a decision that day. Because right now, the impatience economy isn't just from the client side, it's from the candidate side. And if the clients aren't fast enough, they're gone. They're on to the next job opportunity. What you have to think about is, how can we, in the first interaction with the client, make it clear and obvious that we have a candidate who can and will do the job for that client. Showing is knowing. So Scott's recommendation is line up your talent, and so you can show the clients we've got the right person for you. So Ryan, you want to do part 2 of this session?
Absolutely. Thanks, David. Scott's definitely a favorite presenter of ours, and he definitely needed 2 sessions to get all this across. In part 2, he shared steps 3 through 7, so I'll go through those. The step number 3, bake in speed. And what does he mean by that? Well, for both candidates and customers, for your candidates, it's about setting expectations for follow-up. And he says, give them the red velvet rope treatment. Explain to them, these core candidates, how they fit your primary focus, that you can provide them special access, and that you only need 2 things from them: permission and follow-up, and that'll keep things moving. Setting expectations with customers for responsiveness. He recommends saying, look, customer, I know you're busy. I'll only call you for 3 reasons. 1, present top talent. 2, to ask you an important question. 3, after an interview. Scott, everyone in the session raised their hand when he asked if they had been ghosted by a client. To prevent this, he recommends saying to the client, hey, if I don't reach you, will you return my call before the end of the day so that I can continue to do quality work for you? It's a great way to bake in speed. Step 4, build capacity, improve your talent flow. Scott's identified 8 streams of bringing in talent. We can't go through all of them today. We actually have a Lunch with Haley archived. So if you go to lunchwithhaley.com, you can search Scott Wintrip and you'll pull up a deep dive into those 8 streams. But he points out here that most staffing firms only focus on 2 or 3 of the more obvious ones, like automation, which is what he lumps job boards and career sites and your ATS into, or networking, or referrals. So those are really important, but most top talent are actually taking themselves offline in today's environment because they're being bombarded and they're tired of it. So it's really important to get all streams working for you. There's 8 of them. And again, you can go to lunchwithhaley.com and get a whole hour on Scott presenting that with us. Step number 5 is expand your core prudently. So what David talked about, identifying that core, once a recruiter can get an inventory of 10 core individuals in that lane, then they might be ready to add one more core job to recruit for. So you want to really be strategic with that growth. Step 6 is to keep lean and create renewable talent. You want to be able to make the case that your core talent that's working for you is more secure working for you than taking a job with a single employer. It's just like having an agent. So Scott actually shared a really great anecdotal here. There's a healthcare client that he works with. They now have an 82% redeployment rate at 30% margins. Imagine the lifestyle business that could afford you with that kind of redeployment with that profit. And step 7 is stay the course. He says monitor, adjust, and improve. And what Scott shared here, he shared both high-tech and low-tech examples of how to market talent. First, the key to marketing talent is marketing their accomplishments, not their skills. And a high-tech example would be investing in your own app, like what we were talking about earlier, which can be quite costly, but an app to directly market that talent. An effective low-tech option is a simple talent showcase board on your website, and that can go out in an email to your employers. Scott recommends a best practice to create a sense of urgency with them is to state right in that email how many employers that email goes to of this live talent so that they understand it's a first come, first served situation for your available talent. And with that, Matt Lozar is next up on team building.
Thanks, Ryan. Another one of the sessions I went to with some of the other members of the team was from Rob Mosley, and really high energy session, 55-minute session that talked about, how can you really build trust in a team? And one example he did was on effective communication. And obviously communication is important, but one example Rob showed to really exhibit how some people aren't really active listeners was he was saying something, and then at the same time he took his thumb and index finger, put them in a circle, and moved them over to his cheek. And at the end of it, he said, "What the heck did I just say?" And about 95% of the room had no idea. So it's really focusing on that communication. How can you have effective communication in your team where everybody is actively listening to keep that momentum going? He also talked about, obviously the Darwin quote that talks about survival of the fittest, but the really full part of that quote is how can you adapt to your new environment? And with technology changing, artificial intelligence, anything changing, all of it's changing, even it seems faster by the year and the month and the week. How can your team adapt to that and your company adapt to that? Some of the other takeaways, we're talking about how building trust takes time, and it can be really easy to get rid of that trust. Mastering conflict, which conflict among a team is actually is better than not having conflict if you're able to discuss things constructively to get the best results. Focusing on achieving commitment to where you're showing your team, reinforcing the value and importance of their work being done and the people doing the work, and then focusing on results. Rob spent a lot of time on the Eisenhower box, which, to put simply, focuses on what's being important versus what's being urgent, and using that to focus on your tasks and your priorities. And one of his last takeaways was a true measure of a great team is when they meet the results they set out to achieve. Next up, I'm going to pass it over to Brian.
Thanks, Matt. And this is probably one of my favorite sessions that we went to throughout the staffing world, and this was on gamification. And overall, the most important point to understand about gamification is to know how your team responds to different types of motivation. Is your team a cooperative or competitive team? If you issue your team if you issue your cooperative team a competitive sales incentive, you'll demotivate them. Instead, offer a team-based bonus that's rewarded through working together. Here's another way to look at it. If you hire a team for empathy, you'll want to do team challenges. If you hire your team for competition, then you can do an individual 1v1 style challenges to motivate them. The second point that Kate covered was all millennials want a trophy mentality. And I'm sure that we've all heard this before, and it's given that millennials are now, I think, 37% of the workforce, it's something that we've all probably said ourselves. And I'm pretty confident in saying that we've all used a phone app before, whether it's for games, productivity, weight loss, exercise, or many other reasons. Because of this, we've also experienced all these little achievements that are built into phone apps that pop up on the screen to let you know that you've beaten a tutorial level or you've walked enough miles to cover Australia. And it feels really good, doesn't it? Well, imagine growing up your entire life with these micro trophies at every step of the way. And that's how millennials are. Now you understand them. What this means for managers is the ability to use this to your advantage and offer small, great jobs to millennials to get that dopamine boost to get their motivation. Telling someone to do their job isn't actually motivating in the absence of positive feedback because you're missing out on the benefits of dopamine. Use science to your advantage and let your team know when they're on the right track and doing a great job. So, okay, rewards aren't always verbal. It's not always going to be a great job, but they don't need to be expensive either. As long as the prize is announced, reinforced, measurable, and visible, it will be considered fair and people will compete to get it, whether it's a cooperative competition or a 1v1 competition. Also, it's important to note that more isn't always better. $1 is actually more effective than $10. So put away those gift cards and instead hand out a Red Bull, a Monster, a candy bar, or if you really want to, a literal $1 bill. And always remember that simple phrasing when motivating your team can be important here to getting the most out of your team. Instead of demanding that a salesperson gets 60 meetings a week, rephrase it as, salespeople like you, on average, get 60 meetings this week. No one wants to be average. Everyone wants to beat the average. So, Brad, you're up next.
Thanks so much, Brian. David and I had the chance to present our Smart Marketing 20 quick tips to drive dramatic results. And really what this was were a collection of different marketing mistakes and how to approach things slightly differently. And I'm not going to obviously highlight all 20, but I want to feature 5 that are near and dear to my heart. And one is developing a strong value proposition. So in order to be an effective marketer, you need to look at what value you provide to the end consumer. It's not about your services. It's not about your process. It's what the end consumer gets out of working with you. Then it's focusing your message on the client, not you. And the best way to do this is to take a look through your marketing collateral in your website and look at how many I, we's, and us you use and flip that on its head. It's about the end consumer. Next, we need to create personas for our target audience. So identify who you're trying to reach, see what their key rationale is, see what their biggest headaches are, and then develop your marketing around that. Number 4 is adding strong calls to action everywhere. I just saw a stat that 70% of B2B websites have no call to action on the site. It's hard to close a sale if you're not asking for it. So look at your site, look at your other marketing materials, and look for ways to include those great calls to action so people know what to do next. And finally, embrace change. There's so much technology that was presented at the vendor expo there. So many great tools and tips to try to drive more efficiency in your business, and we need to embrace those. On the marketing side, we need to look at what's next and embrace that and make sure that we're sharing our message in the right forums. And just to wrap things up, we have a whole collection of smart marketing tips that you can find at our website, haleymarketing.com/smart marketing. There's a full checklist that walks you through how to create a very effective and strategic marketing strategy. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Matt, who's going to talk about retaining top talent.
The last session I wanted to talk about was from Mike Menzer. He's talked about, finding ways to really, retain talent, because if you're able to retain that talent longer, especially in this market, that's going to help your business grow. And, Mike suggested having a point of contact for a lot of this, but then making a satisfaction survey to interview, your current employees to really get a hold on what the problem areas are, create an action plan off of the results of that survey, and then communicate results to your team. If you ask them to take the time to fill out this survey, share the results and then share the action plan on what you're going to do to improve on those problem areas, and also share the areas that are working really well. What can you do to synchronize recruitment and engagement? When you're in the recruitment process, find out what really works with your company. What are your best employees? What characteristics do they exhibit? What kind of culture do they want to work in? Use that in your recruitment, and then after employees come to your company through onboarding, hire the right candidates, find them, get them to engage with your company, find the right ways to create that engagement so they feel like they want to stay with your company for a long time. And Mike closed with this quote from Richard Branson that talked about how you want to train your people well enough so they can leave, but treat them well enough so they don't want to. So really focus on developing the talent so they're ready to take a higher level position if it's not open with your company, but make your company such an incredible place to work, they don't even want to think about leaving. And that's the last session we're going to talk about. I'm going to pass this over to David, who's going to highlight our Genius Award winners.
Thanks, Matt. And I know, folks, that we are already a little over on time, but the Staffing World Recap always has a lot of content. We're going to very quickly say congrats to a few of our 2018 Genius Award winners, and then we'll wrap things up today with our lessons learned. So we have just a few more minutes to go. On the Genius Awards, big congrats to our friends at The Resource, who challenged us to put together a new, bold, dramatic website with strong copy, great calls to action, and clearly explain some of their very unique differentiators. And we were thrilled when ASA awarded them a grand prize for the best website in their category. Also, our congrats go out to our friends at Johnson & Hill, who in a different category also took a grand prize for their new website. Theirs really needed to focus on the brand continuity they've had with some other activities they've done in their local market. And you can't see it from pictures, but a big part of what we need to do with their website was focused on search engine optimization and user experience to make sure that desktop, mobile, we were doing everything possible to provide a great experience for the talent to get them to the site, to the jobs, through the application process as best we could. Also, our kudos go to, there we go, our friends at Vector Technical, who have done work with us for a long, long time. We've helped them with websites, we've helped them with email marketing, and this past year they said, guys, we've got a gap in social media. Can you develop a campaign for us to really focus on building followers to our social profiles, and even more importantly, driving traffic to our website? They were an award winner in the social media category, and thanks to this campaign, and for those of you looking for candidates, you need to think about social recruiting, because we were able to drive an 82.2% increase in job applications with this social marketing campaign, and their Facebook followers grew by 147%. And lastly, congrats go to Hamilton Riker, who their CEO, Kelly McCrate, is the outgoing president of the American Staffing Association, put on an awesome rock concert the last night of Staffing World. That was really cool. But they had challenged us to put together some new collateral to help them as they're looking for ways to increase market share, clearly explain the range of services they do, and position their firm as a total workforce solutions company. And we were very proud to have played a part in the award they won from the American Staffing Association for their collateral. All right, and that brings us to the end. It's time to go through our 2018 lessons learned. We had a big crew, so now we're going to have everybody share just a few things that they got out of Staffing World 2018. Mark, you're up first.
Thanks, David. First one is what Jeremy Gucce said. Your competitors are lazier than you think. This was something that was echoed in a bunch of the sessions, and most people know that technology changes are coming, but they don't know how they're going to deal with them. There's opportunity in getting ahead of the curve when everyone else is trying to catch up. Second, don't be afraid to reframe the language you use when talking to your clients, your candidates, internal people, and even yourself to drive success. Michelle mentioned this in the new language of staffing presentation, but the way we talk about a topic can put people in a particular mindset. If we change the language we use, we can get them into a more positive mood before we even begin. And then finally, just from a personal standpoint, as a member of the creative team at Haley Marketing Group, my interactions with clients are pretty limited. I basically talk to clients when we do a kickoff call for a new website. So it was great to get to talk to some of these people that I've done websites for, that I worked on projects for, and it was just really nice to be able to sit down and talk with them about their businesses, about life, and a little soccer too.
Thanks, Mark. And it was great having you at Staffing World this year. Matt.
Building off what Mark said, it was awesome to really have discussions with current clients or prospects that came up to our booth, whether like we highlighted Vector before. I've been talking to Tim for a number of years. He lives in Cleveland. I'm from Cleveland, so we able to finally meet in person and talk about some areas. It wasn't soccer like Mark, but it was about our Cleveland sports and have some great conversations there. Testing new technology. If you walked around the expo hall or could even see the expo hall, there was, felt like hundreds of different companies with some kind of new technology. Find a new technology that helps you meet a business goal. Analyze those results and then make changes. It could be continuing to optimize that technology you just adopted, or maybe that technology isn't the right fit. Go out and find a new one that is. Building trust seemed to be a really big way to, build your team, build your team and to build some better results with your team. How can you build that trust through communication, through compliments, through criticism? The best way to really have everyone rowing the boat the same way to get them to meet that goal for your team. And the last one was a quote that actually came from our senior copywriter, Kathy, when she talked about it's a marathon at a sprinting pace. And my number one piece of advice for people going to Staffing World next year is that it's in Las Vegas and start preparing now.
Thanks, Matt. That's great. All right, Michelle.
Okay. I had a really great week. I learned so much. And like Mark and Matt said, just sitting down with your clients face to face is it's so different than maybe something you hear over the phone. Finding out what their challenges are and sitting across from them at a round table just gives you a whole new perspective on the jobs that we do. We can definitely start implementing the new language of staffing now. I'm on the social media team, and we write these messages all the time, so this is something that we need to take into consideration immediately. Like I said, 54321 has already impacted my life. It's almost annoying how effective it is, but it's a tool that I'm going to continue to use forever. And lastly, we all just want to put people to work, and I think seeing the ASA's Employee of the Year on stage and hearing different success stories, it's just gives me a lot of appreciation for the industry and the part that we play in it.
That's awesome, Sean. I think we don't always step back to think about all of the good we do for the world as an industry. We spend so much time fighting fires and listening to unhappy clients or unhappy candidates that it is hard to remember that putting people to work is what our industry does. So I'm thrilled you walked home with that lesson. Brian.
Thanks, David. And for this one, efficiency is important, from recruiting spend to workload management to just general management. And the one I'm going to point here, the example, is from Anders. He was the Futurist keynote session, and he really spoke about how technology should be used to help automate repetitive tasks so that us as people can really excel at the things that we do really good at. So really lean on technology as much as you can to make yourself more efficient, because that'll make your company more efficient. The next one is that it's really important that we need to think about how things are changing and how we can embrace it to make our life better. And I know I talked about millennials earlier, but because they're becoming so much of part of the workforce now, even from last year to this year, we're seeing the conversation change from how do we deal with them to how do we motivate them and how do we make them more part of our company. So even just how that mentality changes is really great to see, and how the staffing industry is embracing it. And then lastly, probably my most favorite part of the entire conference, and kind of helped me reshape how I think about the staffing industry, actually pretty much any industry, is that we're all technology companies with an X lean. Whether it's our complex ATS CRM systems we're using, PPC advertising, geo-targeting, AI-based technology, whatever it might be, we all need to understand how technology can be used to make us more efficient, more effective at what we do, and grow faster.
Thanks, Brian. Ryan.
Right. So, we heard a stat early that there's a 386% turnover rate in staffing, and that just screams opportunity in this tight labor market. Effective redeployment of talent that you've already got in your ATS is a great place to start, as we mentioned a few times in this presentation. Second one, and this is from Scott Wintrip, ask yourself, are you providing fast, convenient access? The impatience economy is so real, and in 2018, it's an absolute requirement to do this to be competitive. It's not just a feature. And lastly, from Mel Robbins on the last day, show appreciation. This should be a no-brainer, but it's good to remember that everyone just wants to know that they matter, and you can apply this to your neighbors and everywhere through life, but especially your talent. If they don't feel this way, someone else is going to get the chance to give them that red velvet rope treatment, and that's an opportunity lost.
Thanks, Ryan. And Paula, we've been quiet in our presentation because I know you just ran meeting to meeting to meeting the entire time at Staffing World, but share some of your takeaways.
Thanks, David. And there were some great takeaways, but here are a few that we touched on earlier that I thought were important and you should know and worth stating again. 56% of all web traffic is from mobile devices, and that number is growing exponentially. So unfortunately, we see many staffing websites still immobilized, not mobile device friendly. So what should you do? Make sure your site is ready for the mobile searcher, easy to find contact info, and quick and easy process to search and apply for jobs. Secondly, leveraging technology advancements and updating your digital footprint. Did you know that after about 2 years, your website may likely be outdated? I know, sad to hear that, but new technology appears every single day. And so just make sure that you're up to date with the latest website technology. And lastly, I think smart marketers, as David mentioned earlier, are using social media to stay top of mind. Investing in a strong social media presence is not a luxury anymore. It's a business necessity. So if you didn't know this, 8 out of 10 U.S. adults are using Facebook. 467 million people are on LinkedIn. So like it or not, social media is influencing your target audience, and you really need to implement a social media strategy that's going to strengthen your competitive brand. It's going to drive more traffic to your website, and most importantly, generate more job orders and job applications. So up to the next one, David.
Thanks. And Brad, you and I now went from the new guys doing this 100 years ago to now we're the old guard. So let's wrap it up with the two old guys.
You've got it. So number one, don't forget the client. I think in this candidate shortage, we're consumed with recruiting, and sometimes we forget the client. And one of the challenges there is that when you do get a good qualified candidate in the door, you better have a client lined up that you can place them with immediately. Otherwise, they're going to get placed by your competitor. So don't let lead generation fall by the wayside. Number two, embrace technology because it's driving positive change. We heard a lot about technology today. There's a lot of efficiencies built into it. We need to embrace that and stop doing things the way that we've always done it. Number three, invest in team building. We heard about 33% turnover in the industry, and people are leaving because they're not gelling with their team members. We need to look for ways to help them gel to make sure that our teams are working efficiently together. And last, we need to keep our commitments as leaders. If you show up 2 minutes late to a meeting, that's telling your team that it's okay to show up 2 minutes late for a meeting. And there was a great suggestion. Use your calendar effectively. Don't jam too much on there. Set your calendar and then defend your time. Don't try to squeeze things in because you're going to break your commitments. And David, why don't you wrap it up?
Thanks, Brad. All right, no surprise here. My number one takeaway, everyone was talking about recruiting. It's a huge issue, but what amazes me is everybody's doing the same things to recruit. So if I want different recruiting results than the competition, I have to do things differently. I have to better optimize my career site, my website. I have to test alternative advertising strategies than what everybody else is doing. I have to really build a social recruiting game plan. And then I have to think about how do I create an employment brand so I'm not part of that 55% of staffing companies who can't even be named by their temps. I want my company to stand out with a unique, differentiated strategy on the talent side. Next one is it's a lot easier to be innovative when you're not in the office. I love coming to work every day. I love the people that are here. But when you're firefighting, which happens as soon as you sit down at your desk and start looking at your email, you're no longer thinking about the future. You're only thinking about today. So when you get away from the email and you get away from the firefighting and you fill your days with other people talking about ideas and just, it doesn't even have to be concepts directly related to staffing, but like leadership topics and all of the keynote speakers, ideas start popping in your mind, and you start connecting the dots, and you think about ways to be innovative in solving your business problems. So it's huge to make sure every business owner, every salesperson, every recruiter, part of your work month, not every week, but a part of your work month should be planned time away from the office where you can focus on being better at doing your job, not just doing your job. And lastly, this sort of builds on Scott Wintrip's message. Hyper-focus is the best differentiation. We're in an industry that is extremely hard to stand out. Everybody wants to say their service is different, but it's never different enough to stand out. However, being hyper-focused on 3 to 5 core skills that you're better than anybody else in your market at filling is a way to stand out, is a way to make yourself known, is a way to build a brand, and it allows you to be faster, more consistently provide better talent, have more clear differentiation on the client and the candidate side, and ultimately to become more profitable. All right, I also do have a reward for those people who have stuck with us. Always, as I mentioned, this webinar recap goes long. So your reward for sticking around till the end is the last day of Staffing World. The folks at Indeed were so kind as to announce that effective January 7th, they're no longer going to be giving any recruiting-oriented company, staffing firms, recruiting firms, headhunters, RPO firms, no more free organic traffic on Indeed. So if you're dependent today on a lot of traffic coming from free posts on Indeed, it's going away in 2 months. So as soon as we got back from Staffing World, the team you hear on the webinar today and a few of our other key players in the organization got together and we brainstormed, what can you do about it? And we put together a 38-page ebook that shows ideas on how to survive this, as we're calling it, Indeed-mageddon. Indeed has done us a great favor for 15 years in giving us free traffic, but now that it's going away, we need to figure out what to do next. And this ebook will give you tons of ideas. And you can get it by going to haleymarketing.com/Indeed. So there's your reward for staying till the end. Thank you very much. All right. We will stay online. If you want to ask questions, you can use the chat and we'll be happy to answer questions, or you can reach out to me or anybody else at Haley Marketing Group from our 888 number, or you can email me and I'll get you in touch with the right person. And lastly, we hope you'll join us. We are actually going to hold a special webinar in a week and a half, Tuesday, November 15th, on how you can deal with the traffic loss now that Indeed is turning off your free posts. So we're going to be covering some of the ideas in that ebook and some other ideas on how to implement the 4 pillars of recruitment marketing as effectively as possible. And then we'll be wrapping up our November webinars with a product demo on blogging and newsletters and showing you what some of the latest trends are, both in blog content development and newsletters, and how to get email through for staffing companies. From all of us at Haley Marketing, thank you so much for being part of today's Lunch with Haley webinar.